the boy who made justice walk. Free my mother and I'll make you walk again. The words cut through the courtroom like a blade. Judge William Carter, paralyzed from the waist down for 8 years after a devastating car accident, looked up from his papers in disbelief. The promise from 12-year-old Kevin Washington seemed absurd, impossible. Laughter erupted immediately. Prosecutors exchanged mocking glances. Reporters whispered to each other, barely concealing their amusement. "That child has lost his mind," muttered a woman in the gallery. "Poverty does terrible things to these people." Kevin Washington stood there because his mother, Deborah, faced false embezzlement charges. She had worked as a courthouse janitor for 15 years, knew every corner of that building, every face, every secret. The accusation was brutally simple. $50,000 had vanished from the administrative safe, and the poor black woman was the obvious suspect. The boy was only 12, but his eyes carried a disturbing maturity. While everyone laughed at his impossible promise, he calmly observed each person in the room, memorizing faces, cataloging reactions. He wasn't begging for mercy. He was someone who had seen enough cruelty to know exactly what he was doing. "Boy," Judge Carter said sharply, "this is a serious court, not a circus. Your mother is guilty. There are no miracles here." More laughter echoed through the room. Kevin didn't look away. "I know who stole the money," he said quietly but loud enough for everyone to hear. "And I can prove it." The courtroom fell silent for a few seconds before the laughter returned, even louder this time. "Then speak up, Sherlock Holmes," someone shouted from the back. Kevin smiled for the first time, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "First you release my mother. Then I'll show you how you'll walk again." While everyone mocked the child who dared challenge the system, no one noticed the small digital recorder hidden in his school backpack. No one noticed how his eyes were fixed specifically on the judge's assistant, Thomas Mitchell, who had stopped laughing abruptly when Kevin mentioned knowing who stole the money. And definitely no one imagined that this 12-year-old boy had spent the last 6 months secretly investigating every person in that courtroom. Judge Carter banged his gavel with excessive force, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "This court will not tolerate this circus." His cold eyes fixed on Kevin with contempt. "Boy, your mother is guilty. $50,000 disappeared from the administrative safe, and she had full access. Case closed." Kevin remained motionless, but his mind worked like a computer processing data. He watched Thomas Mitchell fidget nervously with his fingers whenever money was mentioned. He noticed how the man avoided looking directly at Deborah, who was crying silently. "My mother has worked here for 15 years without a single complaint," Kevin said, his voice cutting through the tense air. "Why would she steal now?" The prosecutor, Mr. Davidson, laughed dismissively. "Because people like her always steal when they have the opportunity. It's in their nature." The racist remark exploded through the room. Some people shifted uncomfortably, but no one protested. Kevin felt the familiar burning of injustice rising in his chest, the same feeling he'd had since he was 8, when police searched his home for drugs that never existed, or when teachers assumed he cheated because boys like him couldn't be naturally intelligent. Deborah Washington worked 3 jobs to support her son alone. Janitor at the courthouse during the day, office cleaning at night, and weekends at a laundromat. Kevin grew up practically on his own, which made him observant, analytical, able to read people with disturbing precision. "Your Honor," the defense attorney said nervously, "I would like to request more time to—" "Denied," Carter cut him off. "The evidence is clear. Deborah Washington had access, opportunity, and motive. Poverty is always motive enough." More malicious laughter from the gallery. Kevin watched Thomas Mitchell more closely. The man wore a new Rolex too expensive for a court clerk's salary. His nails were perfectly manicured, and he drove a BMW that Kevin had seen in the parking lot. Details that a 12-year-old boy from the projects shouldn't notice, but someone accustomed to observing injustice learned to catalog automatically. "What do you have to say in your defense?" Carter asked Deborah, his voice laden with contempt. "I've never stolen anything in my life," she murmured through her tears. "I work honestly to support my son." "Honestly?" Davidson laughed. "A black single-mother janitor. Interesting definition of honesty." Kevin clenched his fists. At 12, he had already learned that the system wasn't designed for people like them. He grew up watching his mother being humiliated, belittled, treated as invisible or suspicious. But he also grew up watching, listening to conversations they thought he didn't understand, memorizing faces and patterns of behavior. "My mother didn't steal that money," Kevin said again, louder this time. "And I can prove it." The courtroom erupted in cruel laughter. "Sure you can, kid. someone shouted. With what evidence? Your childish drawings? Thomas Mitchell stopped fidgeting. For a split second, his eyes met Kevin's, and the boy saw something that confirmed his suspicions. Fear. Pure, genuine fear. Not the fear of being unjustly accused, but the terror of someone with hidden secrets who realizes someone else may know. Judge Carter leaned forward. Pathetic boy. Do you think you can come here with your childish fantasies and change reality? Your mother is a thief and you are the son of a thief. Accept it and save us time. Kevin took a deep breath and smiled again. Are you sure you want to continue with this? Because when I prove my mother is innocent, you'll have to fulfill your part of the agreement. What agreement? Carter growled. I'll make you walk again. Remember? The room fell silent before the laughter returned, but Thomas Mitchell wasn't laughing. He stared at Kevin with visible fear, his hands now shaking on the polished wooden table. What those privileged people didn't know was that each act of contempt was writing their own sentence of defeat. And a 12-year-old boy was about to teach them all that underestimating someone because of their color or origin is always a fatal mistake. The cruel laughter continued when Kevin did something unexpected. He smiled, not the smile of an intimidated child, but something calculated, almost too adult. Okay, he said calmly. I'll prove my mother is innocent first. Then you'll have to keep your word about walking again. Judge Carter banged his gavel violently. Enough of this nonsense. Guard, remove this kid before I charge him with contempt. But Kevin didn't move. 6 months, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. That's how long I spent investigating every person in this courtroom. Thomas Mitchell stopped breathing. What had been nervousness had now turned into visible panic. His hands shook so badly that he had to hide them under the table. Kevin looked directly at him. 6 months watching, listening, taking notes. You think kids are invisible, right? That we don't understand adult conversations. At that moment, a firm voice echoed from the back of the room. The boy is right. Everyone turned to see a black woman of about 45 in an impeccable business suit walking determinedly down the center aisle. Attorney Patricia Williams, New York Bar Association, she announced, showing her credentials. I'm here to represent the Washington family. Prosecutor Davidson's face went pale. Patricia Williams wasn't just any lawyer. She was nationally famous for exposing judicial corruption schemes and had a 97% win rate in cases of racial injustice. How did you hear about this case? Davidson stammered. A very smart little boy called me 3 weeks ago, Patricia replied, winking at Kevin. Kevin had found Patricia's phone number in an online search for lawyers specializing in discrimination cases. It took him a week to work up the courage to call, but when he explained the situation and mentioned his suspicions about the real culprit, Patricia was intrigued. For the past 3 weeks, Kevin and Patricia had been working in secret. The boy had become an unlikely spy, using his invisible status to map every suspicious movement in the courtroom. He discovered that Thomas Mitchell frequented an expensive casino every Friday, drove a BMW 2 new for his salary, and had recently purchased a $300,000 house with cash. Your Honor, Patricia said firmly, I formally request the reopening of the investigation. I have substantial evidence pointing to the real culprit. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Carter banged his gavel furiously. Denied. This case has been decided. Actually, Patricia continued, federal law allows me to present new evidence if there's reasonable suspicion of judicial error based on racial prejudice. She opened her briefcase and pulled out an official document. Here is the order from the federal prosecutor's office authorizing a full investigation. Thomas Mitchell tried to discreetly stand, but Kevin pointed at him. Mr. Mitchell, don't you want to stay and listen? After all, working so closely with the judge, you must be curious about who really stole that money. Mitchell's eyes widened in terror. Patricia smiled. Funny you should mention that, Kevin. Mr. Mitchell, could you explain how you bought a $300,000 house last month? Your annual salary is $45,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin watched every reaction. He saw Davidson nervously shuffling papers, Carter clenching his wheelchair arms until his knuckles turned white, and Mitchell looking as if he might faint. You know what's most interesting, Kevin continued, now with the room's full attention? I know the combination to the safe. My mother told me because she trusts me. And I know that only 3 people have access. My mother, the judge, and Mr. Mitchell. His words fell like bombs in the absolute silence. Patricia opened another folder. Kevin, show them what you found about the security cameras. The boy took a deep breath. For weeks, he had noticed something the adults had completely ignored. The cameras in the vault hallway had blind spots, but the parking lot camera perfectly captured anyone entering and leaving the building at unauthorized times. "Mr. Mitchell," Kevin said, looking directly into the terrified man's eyes, "do you remember the night of March 15th? It was a Friday after hours. The cameras show you returning to the building at 11:47 p.m. Thomas Mitchell stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "I need to use the bathroom." But two federal agents appeared at the door at that very moment. Patricia had anticipated this reaction. "Mr. Mitchell," said one of the agents, "we need to talk about your recent financial activities." The look of panic on Mitchell's face confirmed everything Kevin had suspected during months of patient observation. As Mitchell was escorted out under everyone's shocked gaze, Kevin turned to Judge Carter, who now looked completely different. Small, frightened, confronted with irrefutable proof that he had convicted an innocent woman. "Do you still think my mother stole the money?" Kevin asked calmly. Judge Carter watched Thomas Mitchell being escorted away by federal agents, and for the first time in 8 years, something other than paralysis left him completely immobile. Reality was crumbling around him like a house of cards. "It's not over yet," Kevin said calmly, his eyes fixed on the judge. Patricia Williams opened a third folder, bulkier than the previous ones. "Kevin, show him what else you found." The boy pulled a small laptop from his backpack, connecting it to the courtroom sound system. "Over the past 6 months," Kevin began, his voice echoing clearly, "I recorded everything. Every conversation, every racist comment, every joke about my mother when you thought no one was listening." Carter's blood ran cold. The first recording began to play. Prosecutor Davidson's unmistakable voice echoed through the speakers. "Blacks always steal when they get the chance. It's in their nature." Immediately followed by Carter's knowing laugh. "Exactly. That's why you don't even need to investigate much. We already know the outcome." The room exploded in shocked murmurs. Reporters rose like beasts smelling blood. Cameras flashing. "There's more," Patricia said with a predatory smile. Kevin clicked on the next file. Carter's voice filled the courtroom. "These black cases are always the same. Guilty until proven innocent. Saves the court time." Carter's face turned completely red. He tried to speak, but Kevin continued. "This one is from last week. A new recording. That kid thinks he can come here and play lawyer. Housekeeper's son trying to be smart. I'll show him his place." Each word stabbed at Carter's reputation. The audience that had laughed at the boy now looked at the judge with horror and disgust. Patricia seized the moment. "These recordings have already been sent to the National Council of Magistrates, the national press, and the FBI." "That was taken out of context," Carter stammered desperately. "Private conversation." Kevin smiled with the same calm he'd maintained throughout. "Do you want me to play the recording where you said you were going to teach that arrogant black family a lesson?" The destruction was systematic and brutal. 6 months of meticulous planning were unfolding like a symphony of justice. Kevin had documented not only conversations but also behaviors, biased decisions, and a clear pattern of institutional racism now exposed for the world to see. Patricia stood solemnly. "Your Honor, based on this evidence of systematic racial bias and unethical conduct, I formally request not only the complete acquittal of Deborah Washington, but also the opening of a federal investigation against this court for civil rights violations." At that moment, something extraordinary happened. As Carter tried to process the magnitude of his downfall, a strange sensation ran through his legs. First a tingling, then pressure. The extreme stress, the adrenaline, the shock. Something was awakening in his nervous system. Kevin watched closely, and for the first time, his serious expression softened. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "are you feeling something different?" Carter looked down, incredulous. His toes moved inside his shoes, a movement he hadn't felt in 8 years. Doctors would later say that rare cases of psychosomatic paralysis can reverse under extreme stress. Others would call it coincidence. But at that moment, as Carter slowly moved his legs for the first time in nearly a decade, everyone understood they were witnessing something impossible. "I said I would make you walk," Kevin murmured. "But I didn't say it would be the way you expected." Carter tried to stand, his trembling legs responding after years of immobility. When he finally managed to stand, leaning on the table, it wasn't a moment of celebration. It was the physical symbol of his complete humiliation. Kevin had fulfilled his impossible promise, but at a price Carter could never have imagined. Deborah Washington wept with relief in Patricia Williams' arms. Kevin watched everything with the same calm he'd shown from the beginning, not with arrogance, but with the serenity of someone who knew that justice, when it comes completely. The 12-year-old boy had taught grown men a lesson they would carry for the rest of their lives. Underestimating someone because of the color of their skin or social background is always a fatal mistake. As cameras recorded Carter taking his first steps in 8 years, steps that would lead him straight out of the judiciary and into social ostracism, a silent truth echoed through the room. Sometimes justice needs small hands and big hearts to manifest itself. And when that happens, even the impossible doesn't remain impossible for long. 6 months later, the courtroom where it all happened was unrecognizable. Judge William Carter had resigned the day after the events. His racist recordings played on every news channel in the country. His ability to walk again became a cruel irony. He could move but had nowhere to go. No law firm would hire him. His reputation was permanently destroyed. Thomas Mitchell was sentenced to 8 years in prison for embezzlement and money laundering. The federal investigation discovered he had stolen over $200,000 over 3 years, financing a gambling addiction. The BMW was confiscated, the house auctioned, and his wife publicly filed for divorce. Prosecutor Davidson faced disciplinary proceedings from the Bar Association. Recordings of his racist comments became study material in law schools as examples of institutional bias. He lost his license to practice law and was forced to move to another state, where he now works as an insurance salesman. Kevin Washington became a national sensation. His story was told in documentaries, television programs, and motivational speeches. Prestigious universities offered him full scholarships for when he finished high school. "What impresses me most," Patricia Williams said in a national interview, "is that Kevin never acted out of revenge. He acted out of justice." There's a fundamental difference between destroying someone out of anger and exposing the truth to protect innocent people. Deborah Washington was promoted to administrative supervisor of the new court. "I worked in that place for 15 years, being treated as invisible," she said in her inauguration speech. "Today my son has taught me that visibility isn't something given to us. It's something we take when we stand up for what's right." Kevin created a YouTube channel called Justice at 12, where he teaches other children about their rights and how to document injustices. "Don't wait until you grow up to fight for what's right," he said in his videos. "Injustice has no age, so neither should the fight against it." A year after the events, Kevin was interviewed on the country's main television network. "How did you know you could prove your mother's innocence?" asked the host. Kevin smiled. "I didn't know if I could, but I knew I had to try. My mother taught me that when you see injustice you have two choices, accept it or fight it. Accepting it was never an option." "What about making the judge walk again? How do you explain that?" Kevin thought for a moment. "Sometimes the body responds when the soul is confronted with the truth." Judge Carter lived so long believing his own lies that the shock of reality released something trapped inside him. It wasn't magic. It was consequence. William Carter watched the interview from his small rented apartment, far from everything and everyone. His legs worked perfectly now, but his life was ruined. He had gained the ability to walk but lost everything worth walking for. The real lesson of Kevin Washington's story wasn't only in his victory, but in how he achieved it, not through violence or despair, but through patience, intelligence, and an unshakable faith in justice. He proved that age doesn't determine wisdom, that skin color doesn't define ability, and that sometimes the most powerful people underestimate those who carry true power. Today, Kevin is 15 and attends one of the best private schools in the country on a full scholarship. His mother bought her own home with compensation money. Patricia Williams continues to be his mentor, and together they've helped dozens of families victimized by racial injustice. Kevin Washington's story became legendary not because he made the impossible happen, but because he proved that true strength lies not in the position you hold, but in the courage to fight for truth when everyone around you chooses the comfortable lie. He taught the world that justice isn't a privilege reserved for the powerful. It's a right that belongs to anyone brave enough to demand it.